Hi, I'm Kelly McKinnon, Bermingham. I'm the Director of Behavior Intervention here at the Center for Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders. Welcome to our Parent Training Education Series.
I'm Anna Lockman, Education and Training Director at the Center for Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders. Our mission is to provide hope and help to individuals and families living with autism spectrum disorders, ADHD, and other neurodevelopmental disorders through excellent and innovative clinical care, education and training, research, and engagement. We strive to provide advanced training opportunities to benefit individuals, parents, grandparents, caregivers, professionals, and community agencies on a variety of topics. We're excited to offer this workshop as part of our online training series. We encourage you to access this training during times that work best for you and your family. We hope you find this workshop useful and can apply the information to situations in your own life. Thank you for supporting our education and training initiatives at the Center for Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders.
In this video, we're going to talk now about how to be prepared for many different safety situations. We're going to talk about making sure families, now that you've spent some time, you're ready to manage your child in a reactive situation in a crisis, or now you're ready to be proactive in managing your child's behavior at home, thinking about other aspects of being ready. That will include having a home safety plan. Do you have a home safety plan to make sure your children know what to do in the event of some kind of disaster, maybe an earthquake or a fire? Is your child safe when they're around your car and traveling in your car? Does your child tend to elope or run away?
My name is Johnny Watanabe, and my son's name is Ryan Watanabe. He has been diagnosed with ASD, autism, since 2 years old. He is 5.5 now. Yeah, it's been pretty hard dealing with him at home and in the community as well. One of the major concerns I have with him is eloping. He always wander away.
Let's talk about your whole family's emergency and disaster preparedness. If you have a child with autism, you're likely more organized than most. But there are some things that can make it a little more challenging for a family with autism. So it's important to have a list of things in a place so that you're ready. First of all, we often hear concerns about medication. Having copies of your prescriptions and information from your doctor and who the doctor is in the event that there is an emergency, having those prescriptions all together in one place is very important. There are apps that you can find for free that will help you organize that kind of thing. Knowing where your local police station is, your local fire station, having those addresses, knowing where maybe the closest shelter is, having all of that organized in one spot is very helpful. We often recommend that families register or provide information fact sheets to those types of organizations about their child with autism. For example, providing an information fact sheet to your local police officer or fire station. Those are the two that will often be first responders when needed. And so if they have that information up front already about your child and their medications and their health needs, it'll be very, very helpful and useful. Having some of those comforting and distracting items ready in the event of a disaster or emergency planning is super important. Having special snacks. We know that over 69% of children with autism are extremely picky eaters. In the event of a major emergency or disaster, having a couple of those specific food items will be crucial. Maybe your child will only eat a certain kind of SpongeBob macaroni and cheese. Having a couple of those on hand in an emergency disaster kit is vital. There are many apps that we encourage you to consider. Here in California, there is an app called Ready OC that will organize all of that information for you. Let's talk in general about a home safety plan. First of all, fire alarms. Are your fire alarms working? Many families with children with autism have disabled their fire alarms or figured out a way to have them not make sound because their child is petrified and scared of the alarm going off. But in the event of a fire, you'll want to have had that operating. So having one that operates and some practice time with your child, knowing it's going to go off in a scheduled time as a rehearsal, and walking through an exit plan and a meetup place is important. You need to have your child know what to do when that fire alarm goes off, how they're going to get out of the house, and where they're going to meet. That might involve some practice, which will be challenging for your child, especially if they have a difficult time with sound. But we know from our other video about being proactive, if we schedule it, we practice it, we use visual supports for that experience, and then maybe a real special reward for the practice. Not only have you helped your child be prepared in the event of a fire, you also now have a way to practice other emergency kind of steps that you might need to take. Other type of emergencies you might need to prepare for include earthquakes or floods. And so now that you have a model of a home safety plan, you are schedule practice time with your child, you're using visual supports and a safe meetup place, your whole family can be ready and prepared and know how to exit and meet in the event of a disaster. While we're thinking about safety, let's take a minute and talk about car safety. It is not uncommon for a child on the autism spectrum to have issues or concerns or challenges around riding safely in a car, maybe walking safely with their parents to the car and knowing where to wait, maybe while you're loading things into the car. There are many tools at your disposal that you can use, and we highly recommend that you consider using a car seat lock. There are different types of car seat locks available that children can use, so they're not able to even get out of their car seat. There are decals, magnets that you can put on the outside of your car that have a handprint or a spot that says, put your hand here and wait. You could even make one. You could order a sticker or a magnet then from a site and let your child know this is where you stand. This is where you're supposed to wait calmly. You might even consider a wrist buddy when you're walking with your child, where you tie something around your wrist and it's around your child's wrist, and you walk together safely. And that way, if your child gets out of your hand, the wrist buddy keeps you connected. All of these things are ways to keep your child safe around your car and in parking lot situations. Talking about elopement or wandering prevention, we know that the Interactive Autism Network has done some research around this and talked about some strategies that are the most cost-effective and perhaps the most helpful in prevention of elopement. They include bars on windows, door locks, latches, fencing, use of Project Lifesaver, an organization that can be very helpful in elopement prevention. It includes decals on your home that lets people know that you have a child that might wander. It includes phone trees in your community and knowing all of the local water sources or potential busy streets and highways and having a phone tree prepared so that you can call friends and family right away the second you're concerned your child is missing. And because you've notified your local police department, they'll have that information. And also there are GPS trackers that, while not preventative, in the case that your child does elope or wander, can help immediately track your child so you know where they are. As part of your emergency and disaster preparedness, having a wandering letter and the phone tree has information immediately available to you so that in that moment you're not panicked and you can be prepared and have a strategy. There are also things to consider, which are, as part of your safety planning, if your child were to wander or leave, maybe consider a meeting spot, a spot that you've designated that if your child did leave or wander, you've said in that event, this is where I need you to be so I can come and find you. It also helps to work with other professionals or behavior therapists to work with your child to not leave the house, to put up stop signs, have a system to communicate, to ask or inform you that they really need or want to get out of your home or leave the area for a moment to go see something. All of those strategies are hopefully and possibly very preventative to elopement and wandering situations. In the event that your child maybe is wandered off or lost or engaging in a very, very difficult situation that maybe you're just not fully able to manage yourself at this moment, and you need to call 911 or you need to engage law enforcement, let's talk about and let's hear from a law enforcement officer on what are some important things that we should know. Let's take a minute now to talk about what to expect when children and their families with autism interact with law enforcement. So I have the opportunity now to interview Officer Jurisaga, and I want to ask you a few questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could you tell me, one of the things that we've often suggested to families is if they have a child with autism that maybe they get in touch with their local police station. What kind of information would you like or suggest that families inform their local law enforcement?
That's a great idea, absolutely. I think that a sheet with the basic information, so child's name, height, weight, and obviously that changes, so you would need to update that. Contact information for the residents, phone number, and if there's any areas that the child frequents.
Okay.
So that we know, because when there is a situation where maybe a child with autism has left the residence, time is very important. So the less time that we can use to gather that information, if it's already presented, we can put that on the report and start looking.
Great, okay. Could you give some helpful tips when a family's in crisis and if they feel the need to call law enforcement, what would you hope that even though they're in the crisis, they could share with you right from the start of that call that would help you be prepared for your visit to the home?
Obviously, we would like a description of the child, so we know that when we come into a residence, there might be other children there, so we want to know exactly. Okay. We'd want to know where the child is at that location. Are they in a bedroom? Do they lock themselves in a bathroom? Okay. But also, we'd like to know what triggered the response for the police that day. Did something happen that day, and that it escalated to where the police needed to be called? And then we would like to know if there's stressors and what those stressors are. Is it a verbal thing? Is it something physical? But we also want to know what the calming mechanisms are. We know sometimes a child with autism might rock to soothe themselves. And if we don't know that that's a soothing thing, we might see it as something that might be a dangerous thing. Right. So anything that we know that's either a calming effect or something that's a stress. We'd also like to know if there's any medical problems. Seizures, if there's a medical issue like that, we know that stress can bring that along. So having the police in your home could be a big stressor. So any additional information that could help us de-escalate the situation.
Okay, right from the start.
Right from the start, exactly.
Okay. So what should families expect when they call law enforcement and law enforcement comes into the home? What should the families expect when you arrive?
They should expect, depending on what's reported, that we might come with lights and sirens.
Okay.
And we know that sound can also be a trigger, so it's important for us to know that from the get-go. You can expect we'll be in full uniform with lots of equipment, and depending on what's reported, there could be multiple officers in your home.
Okay.
Right? Then it could be a little chaotic. You could expect that if the situation has escalated to some aggressive behavior, that child might have to be handcuffed. And that's hard, for parents to see. It's hard for officers to do as well. But it's usually to de-escalate the situation and protect the child, protect the officers and the family. And you might also expect us to use the family members as someone to help us communicate. Okay. So you'll be involved and help us de-escalate the situation together.
Okay. What if a family asks you not to use handcuffs?
It's something that we can take into consideration. Different agencies have different policies. We would explain, if we had the time, to explain why we'd be using the handcuffs. Okay. Obviously, if we can not use them, we definitely wouldn't want to use them. But if we have to, depending on the situation, we just definitely explain why we're using it.
Okay. In the event that you do have to handcuff a child with autism, would you share with us what might happen next?
It would all depend on the outcome. So if we determine that hospitalization is required, we would either request an ambulance to transport, and the handcuffs would come off and they would be placed in the gurney and taken to the
Okay.
hospital.
Okay.
If an ambulance isn't required, we would be transporting in our police car, and at that point, handcuffs would still be on the child.
Okay.
But also, depending on the age, a small child, handcuffs wouldn't be suitable because they could just come right out of the handcuffs. But if we determine that hospitalization isn't required, whether it's for a medical or mental, we take the handcuffs off and come up with a safety plan with the family and with the child.
Can you give an example of a safety plan that you've helped come up with in the past with
Yeah,
the family?
absolutely. We would have, I remember a call where it didn't rise to the level of hospitalization, but we spoke with the family and said, okay, now we know what led to this, what triggered this, what are we going to do the next time? And it was
Great.
just give some space for that time. And if it did escalate where they thought it was like the similar situation that happened prior to that day, to give us a call beforehand before it escalated.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so it didn't escalate to violence or someone getting hurt. And
Okay. In that spirit, what kinds of, I know law enforcement around the country are much more aware of autism and the signs of autism and perhaps what to expect, but they don't always necessarily know how to apply that when they're called in for a crisis situation by a family. Would you share some tips that you think that all law enforcement officers should think about and have when they're called in?
I think that definitely getting as much information beforehand.
Okay.
Right.
So that first call is
that
super
first
important.
call,
Okay.
and even if you get limited information from the operator, make contact immediately with who called the police if it's safe to do so.
Okay.
Right. So safety is obviously a first priority for the officers, for the child, and for the family. So if we have the time, I would recommend with officers, any time that you have, slow down and use that time.
Okay.
Right. So asking, I would expect officers to ask all the information from the person calling the police, whether it's a parent, a teacher, someone from a citizen calling, to ask questions about that child's history, if there's any violent behavior in the past, and again, talking about what coping mechanisms and what stressors there are.
Okay.
So definitely knowing those things and knowing that just because someone with autism doesn't respond doesn't mean that they don't want to.
That's right.
Right? They're processing the information. They might not know how to respond, but giving them the time to respond and asking simple, clear questions. And if we are giving directions that, someone with autism might take them literally, so we have to be careful what directions we give. So knowing that beforehand, I think we'll definitely be able to communicate better.
Great. So we heard from the law officer that there is a chance in the event of a crisis, your child may need to be hospitalized. However that situation has been determined, your child might need to go to the hospital. I'd like to think that the hospitals will be trained and prepared for your child with autism, but they may not. In this situation, we're going to help you, families, be prepared in going to the hospital. Just like you did with the police officers, it's a really good idea to share a personal information page about your child. The information page that you take to the hospital should include some of the same information you put together for your local police department. It should have information about your child's communication style, information about your child's interest. You should have a list of comforting and distracting items and maybe have some of those items. You may even need to bring in some food because your child may be being selective or picky about the food they eat, and the hospital may not always provide that in the manner that your child wants. The more information you can give up front and keep in your child's room, the better. We know that the nursing staff teams change, doctors change, and so creating an information sheet that you have ready to share with them about your child, maybe even some of their triggers, some of their movement needs. Sometimes both law officers and hospital staff mistake movements that children with the autism make as aggressive when they're not aggressive. They might just be a way that the way your child copes and manages themselves. Your child may need to have an opportunity to have more space or walk around. Having all that information up front and ready for each staff that shifts through that hospital is very important and will make for a more successful experience at the hospital.
In fact, twice, even though I locked the gate and I locked the door, he know how to open it and just run away from a house out in the street. And luckily, my neighbor saw it and then grabbed him. So that's one of the major concerns there. And he's getting better, but I still have a long way to go.
Thank you for watching our video series. At the end of this video, we're going to provide additional information and links to find out more about how to manage a child on the autism spectrum with challenging and difficult behaviors, as well as for law enforcement to get a greater understanding and perspective on how to interact with families and children on the autism spectrum.